Hello, everybody, and welcome to OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack, and today we're taking a look at a Palkia deck breakdown, but rather than looking at necessarily a deck list and playing some battles, we have the Palkia player himself, Luke Kirkham, who was able to get top 4 this weekend at the Gdansk Regional Championships here with me. So, Luke, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. It's been a while.
I'm doing good, thanks. I'm doing very well. It's been a long weekend, a
Yeah.
good weekend, but yeah, I'm feeling good, and I'm enjoying Pokemon again for the first time in a while, which is that's a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, congratulations on the weekend as well. It was great to see. For people that may not know, Luke has actually been sort of a big part of the channel over the past sort of 10 years, and yeah, was on some of the early streams and that kind of stuff. So it's great to have him back on the channel, especially representing a pretty cool archetype and a brilliant result. So yeah, once again, congratulations. Let's dive straight into it. So obviously, we had LAIC and we've just had Gdansk, and it's been a pretty compact couple of weeks of Pokemon. I think Paradox Rift undeniably has been one of the most impactful sets we've had probably in the past 3 or 4 years, maybe even the past sort of 10 years or so. Not necessarily the doom and gloom that some people may have thought, but it has pretty much given all sorts of new decks a new lease of life. It's adjusted how things are played. We were already in a very wide meta, and we've had a couple more decks sort of sprinkled in. So going into LAIC, I think everything was kind of up in the air. No one really knew what was going to come out of it. And what came out of it was Miraidon and Iron Valiant were the two finalist decks. Plenty of Guardi, which was kind of expected. A couple of other things here and there. Looking at that meta, sort of what led you to Palkia in the first place? Obviously, you've been playing Palkia for a little while, to various different tournaments, but how did your testing go from sort of where you were before, looking at that meta, and then kind of sort of building from that?
Yeah, so I think to start, I've been playing Palkia most of this season. I've got done quite well with it so far this season in terms of the local seeding cup because that was my first major event of the season. But I kept losing in top four, top eight, and the final to Miraidon. Obviously, Miraidon winning at the IC was a bit like, okay, how can we get Palkia to compete? Not necessarily auto win or auto lose, just compete against Miraidon more competitively. You can beat it without an Ice Rider or any other techs, but it's an uphill battle. So they get the first two prizes, you have no comeback at all. So as I just touched on there, I actually ended up settling on. I had a bit of discussion with yourself on some of the decks. A 1-1 Ice Rider. I tested it online, played a few games with it, and it just swung the match up so much because it's got so much health, and it's taking a knockout every turn. So they can't build up energy to go big with a Raichu because they just don't. The energy doesn't stand the board because Ice Rider takes it out. Um, Leading up to the weekend, I played a couple of cups and actually played Entei Valiant. And I've been testing it for quite a few weeks. I was quite set on the deck. I was really enjoying it. And it seemed quite under the radar until it made second at LAIC in Brazil. So that, with it doing so well in Brazil, it kind of made me readjust because I felt like the meta would shift in a way that perhaps wasn't favourable for Entei Valiant. As we saw, I think there's one in top 16. But other than that, there wasn't a huge turnaround in numbers for it. But that was my initial test, and I sort of got a bit stuck, and then I went really back to the comfort of pick with Palkia, and I thought we had a look at some lists online, myself and you, and some of us had some chats and stuff, and I just thought I know the deck, I know the matchup. Let's try the Ice Rider. And once I did, I was feeling quite confident in the Rider matchups because it's just such a presence, such HP, takes two prizes every turn. It's low maintenance, so even if you're not VSTAR powering, it's just Melanie attach, or you can preload if you need to. So that sort of settled me on Palkia. I thought the meta would it's Europe, so it would definitely include a lot more Mew. So the Spiritomb was always going to be an inclusion.
Yeah.
It's also good against Stall. And things, a lot of decks like the Minion, like Charizard, like the Minion, or maybe they have a Pidgeot, which we saw in top four, which we won't just talk about that now, but yeah, we saw in top four. It locks them into play, so it's a two prizes that you can perhaps pick off later in the game. So that was just my thoughts really. I'm comfortable with the deck. I know how to play the deck and the matchups. And other than perhaps Regis, you have no auto loss, and that's obviously not in the format right now. I like decks that can be sort of 50-50 across the board. That give or take, obviously, there's going to be percentage swings either way. But with Palkia, it's around a 50-50 deck, so you can always play into the games, and you do have that element of surprise if people don't know what you're playing and what's in there. Then it will catch people off guard.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you say, a combination of being able to almost like put people on the back foot and sort of make them have to adapt a game plan pretty quickly, as well as including things like an Ice Rider, which people probably haven't seen in a little while, still having things like Cross Switcher, cancelling Cologne to pull off strong swing turns. Yeah, kind of all makes sense to like really be like a perfect storm of a couple of different archetypes or a couple of different like key bits from archetypes like the Cross Switcher, Cologne stuff from Power Excalibur, obviously big attackers, that kind of stuff. Makes a lot of sense. Was there anything you were like, other than Reggie's, I guess, was there any matchup in particular you were worried about that you thought would be particularly popular? Or like you say, did you feel confident enough that everything was around that 50-50 level where you could at least play the game into everything and kind of, try and, like you say, I guess, outplay them using not knowing about the matchup and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think going into it, I was obviously Reggie's not lost, but it's one of those matchups where I'm hoping I don't see it because it's not,
Yeah.
it's not popular in the format. It's just I've just had some bad experience with it in the past playing against it previously when it was a format deck and I played Palkia into it. But other than that, there was no other matchups where I'm like, oh, I'm really worried and hope I don't see that. I think there was a lot more favourable because if Entei did pick up, it is quite favourable. It's not as easy as it may seem. On the front of it, it's a definitely harder matchup than it looks, but it is favourable. So is Mew, and I expected Mew to pick up quite a bit. Miraidon, going into it, even though I'd obviously played against it a lot in tournaments, I knew how to play the matchup, and I knew Ice Rider would help. Of the first few rounds, especially, I was still a bit unsure on that match. I was a bit worried to go into it, and I lost my first match against Miraidon, which put me on the back foot a bit more for it. And I thought, is the Ice Rider even going to carry its weight here? But that was game 3. I got Iono passed into without anything in my deck, and I never drew out of it. I did take 4 prizes before we took any in that game, with my Ice Rider, but then I could never attack again for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
unfortunate. But no matchups I was really terrified of. I think Mew, Entei, Urshi, Inteleon, I feel quite comfortable in the matchup because they don't like hitting into big Pokemon. It screws their math. They're taking 2 prizes, or I'm taking 3. Then you have Power to take a big 1-hit KO because you can build up energies on the field.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
So yeah, nothing I was too worried about.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I guess let's talk a little bit more about the tournament itself. Obviously, people might know, people might not know, but your matchups throughout the day were sort of a bit all over the place. I guess it was kind of like the perfect storm for the deck because it was just lots of, I guess, lots of familiar matchups that you were playing against. Don't feel free, you've got to go through all of them, but there was, it reminded me, there was like, it was mainly like 4 decks, right? It was a lot of Miraidon, a lot of Mew. There was I think you said there was a Roaring Moon at some point during the day. There was, and then there was one more, right? There was
a couple of Entei.
Yeah, a couple of Entei. So it was a lot of, I guess, 2 prize sort of trading decks, which I guess is the exact kind of situation you really want to be in with this kind of deck because it's very much a racing deck. Obviously, you have ways of going above or going below to 3 prizes or 1 prize, but it seems like a brilliant racing deck in that kind of aspect. Were there any games throughout, I guess, day 1 or day 2, not really including top 8 or top 4 because we'll talk about those a little bit separately, but just through the Swiss rounds that were notable, any matchups in particular, or was it all pretty much just plain sailing in terms of trying to just outrace people?
Yeah, I think so. I think having played that first round against Maraudon, which I did lose, it gave me confidence that if I can just obviously manufacture and set up a board state, I perhaps didn't VSTAR power a turn earlier than I should have in that matchup, which probably cost me in the end. But I just tried to Go for the go aggressive. You got Suicune, so you can attack turn one, going second. So Miraidon generally will fill the bench up to at least four. And Raikou is the most common Pokemon they leave in the active.
Yeah.
So attached to it, fleet footed, it gets some more cards. It's the most common Pokemon to stay there. So if you can fill up your bench, get a Suicune out, you can take the first two prizes, and then it just becomes again that 2-2-2 race, which is what that matchup is all about, really. And why I thought it was so good because it generally trades 4 for 3, and they can't. Some people were like, well, can't they just hit you once and then get 4 energy on a Iron Hands? But again, they're still behind in the prize race, even though they're jumping up 1, and it's 4 energy, and it's probably going down next turn. So it makes it awkward. They've got to get 4 energy on there in the first place, which is no easy feat at times for sure.
No.
But yeah, I think it was a good matchup spread. You do have answers against things like Gardevoir with the Greninja clones and Charizard and things like that. But yeah, I think it was definitely. Although I was worried about the modern matchup going in because I still wasn't fully tested with the Ice Rider and online, which is not quite the same as in real life play. I felt confident. I felt good hitting the matchups that I did. Mew, Spiritomb, I can't believe how much of a number Spiritomb does on Mew. It really just says no to the deck, and it's even I played I think 2 of the 3 Mews I played with Fusion Mews, and even then it just says no.
Yeah.
Just slows them down enough that you can just outrace them.
Yeah, definitely. Is it a deck that you were typically choosing to go first with, or was that because of things like the Melanie and stuff like that? Did you ever sort of think maybe going into game 2, maybe typically into a blind method you would still go first, but going into game 2s, was it ever I'm going to try and go second, I'm going to try and get that first 2 prizes, and I'm just going to outrace you?
No, I think it's an evolution-based attacking deck. I mean, you can attack with Suicune, but the main attacker is Palkia.
Yeah.
It's a Palkia deck at its core. It's the only attacking lineup that I've got more than the one of in there. So almost every single match would think of I would choose to go first.
Yeah.
If you're against me, you can get your Spiritomb down, which before they can even start to draw cards, it just really slows them down if they can do anything at all. So it's a deck that I pretty much always want to go first in. Maybe certain Lost Box builds you would want to go second, but I never played against any Lost Box very randomly, just the 7 Miraidon. But that's a very sort of niche scenario and certain deck lists and builds, and it's always a risk against Lost Box because if they get a VIP pass off and go off and set up, you're on the back foot then instantly.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So that was kind of your Swiss round. Looking at the top 8 bracket, when you saw the top 8 bracket, how did you feel? Because obviously there was a couple of Mews, and there was also a Snorlax, which obviously we discussed in the day that you felt that was actually a pretty favourable matchup. You had enough ways of switching, you had cancelling clones, this, that, and the other. You had plenty of ways of hopefully just being able to get over the line of taking 6 prizes. But also there was 3 Charizards and a Lost Box, which whilst, like you say, you've still got answers for, because you hadn't really played through them throughout the day, it would have been immediately like a learning experience. When you found out those top 8 decks, how were you feeling? Did you think this is at my top 8, or do you think this is probably going to be the hardest sort of 3 games that I'm going to have to play throughout the tournament based on the matchups?
Well, I was quite fortunate in the fact that I got Mew in top 8 against someone I'd already played in that day, in the day 2 Swiss, and I'd already scored. It was a non-fusion Mew, so Spiritomb was even stronger into that than it is the fusion Mew.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was quite confident going to that match, but I knew I played it enough times at that point, and I knew if as long as I don't prize Spiritomb a couple of games, that we're going to be in quite a strong position. And actually, both games in top 8, he obviously chose to go first, and they have to fill up their board because they know Spiritomb's coming down, so they need to try and draw through as much as they can. And so I got a turn 1 knockout with Suicune in both games because he went so wide on the board.
Yeah.
And if you establish a Palkia as well as that, it's just so much pressure then with a Spiritomb in play. It really puts a number on them. I was obviously Tord's deck was probably the one that I was a bit worried about because I don't really know what was in it at that point because I've been playing the same time as him. I hadn't got to see fully what was in the deck and what was going on with it. I knew obviously the main attackers. I managed to watch a bit of his stream game previously, but it was it was an interesting deck and concept with a lot of different things that you have to try and keep your mind on. Again, similar to how probably people felt against me, I was a bit like a deer in headlights. Like, what we do in this matchup? What's the angle we go down?
Yeah.
Trying to plan it out in my head. Charizard is one where um, it can be a difficult matchup. You obviously do have. I was one card away in the top 4 game of getting the turn 1 combo of Cross Switcher Cologne on the mana speed, taking out both Charmander, which really puts you in the driving seat. But it's a game where you start trading backwards and forwards. At one point, you just need to not overextend, which is something that I did game 1, and just trade backwards and forwards until they get up to the 1-shot range, and you've got to try and take the last 2 prizes with the Chien-Pao.
Yeah.
But I felt the pressure in top 4. Being on stream with the headsets, I really struggled with that. And then Snorlax, I actually feel okay to Snorlax. I have a lot of switch outs. I have Spiritomb to stop them drawing so many cards. I have Cance and Cologne, and I have Greninja as well. You also can power up the Mew if they try and go heavy. Safeguard. So, yeah, obviously the Charizard matchup is close. I think it's probably unfavoured, as you saw on stream, but it's close if you know how to play the matchup.
Yeah.
And even though I did, I sort of veered away from the path a bit in that game. But other than that, obviously Tours Day, I wasn't too sure about, but I'd be happy to have seen a Mew, and Charizard was just the interesting one to see how that battle went.
Yeah, definitely. Well, either way, a top 4 was a really impressive result, and I think there's a lot of people that always there's people that always sort of flock to see a more rogue archetype doing well. It kind of doesn't even matter what the rogue archetype is necessarily, just always bringing that innovation. And I think, I mean, already on ladder and sort of we've seen people streaming this kind of stuff, picking up the deck. So yeah, that's must be a great feeling, sort of seeing people pick up the deck that you've sort of played with for months on end, crafted and perfected, and now you've got players sort of playing it all over the place. So yeah, it's a huge achievement. Definitely really well done. Based on, I guess, a couple of different angles. So the tournament's sort of done based on a couple of different angles. It's kind of the same question, but were there any cards that you felt you wanted during the day? Were there any cards that you felt that didn't sort of pull their weight? If you could play the tournament again, would there be any changes you'd make, or are you pretty sure that was the 60 for at least that weekend? We'll talk about maybe how we would change the deck for the meta going forward in a minute, but for that tournament specifically, was there anything that sort of didn't really put its weight or was way better than you expected?
Yeah, I think the collapsed stadium is just a dead card. It's a stadium bounce, but I don't play Raihan, so there's absolutely no search in the deck for it whatsoever. So it's completely random. That was perhaps more of a historic inclusion where Lost Box was popular in the past, and they'd obviously set up damage and do math for things, and try and take multiple prizes, or even hit you for say 250 with the Dragonite in the hope of killing you off with a Fable Eye in the following turn.
Yeah.
And then obviously you can collapse it away, and it basically negates the turn for them. But it's too random. There is no. So I used to play a right hand, so I used to be able to find it. It never came into play any time, other than having it in my hand to bounce a stadium or things like that. So that's one thing I thought it's sort of it didn't advance my deck in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
If I was going to go down the sort of same route that I was going in, I'd perhaps think about, because it's a stadium bounce that I wanted with that. So I think it's perhaps a for that tournament specifically, I would have preferred maybe a third vacuum because the amount of Miraidon I played as well over that, or maybe a third vessel, because sometimes finding energy, even though you got Chien-Pao and double vessel, you just need to get your energy early and get them in the bin as well, and that has obviously both effects. So in terms of Pokemon and attackers, I think they're all fine. Mew EX is not there, as you can probably tell by looking at this, it's not there to attack. It's there as a pivot and as a draw engine, sort of Iono proofing yourself. Because you do tend to play your hands down sometimes and have to be Ionoed into smaller hands, and then you can draw back up. So, yeah, there's nothing else I'd massively Um, didn't pull its weight. I think everything had its uses during the day for sure. But yeah, definitely the stadium because it was just too random.
Yeah,
You got no control over when you can have it and use it. So it didn't have any youth in
yeah.
that sense.
Very fair, very fair. So yeah, that's kind of that tournament. But obviously, we're still we're still in the very early stages of Paradox Rift, and we've got another tournament in Europe before the end of the year. There's another tournament over in North America, and then we've still got this format until basically UIC now. So plenty of time still for this format, for better or for worse. Looking at Palkia now, sort of going forward, and we'll talk a bit more about the rest of the results in a moment. But in particular, going forward, how do you feel Palkia evolves? Do you think it's still in a good position, or do you think that real element of surprise was something that was so important to how people were playing against it that it needs to maybe go back in the binder for a little while and wait until people aren't really expecting it again?
Yeah, I think it's a very strange one because we've seen obviously from LAIC into Gdansk, the meta jumped quite significantly, and I feel like it's perhaps going to do that for the next 2 or 3 tournaments as a reaction to the previous one, because it is a new meta and there's a lot of new cards and some new archetypes as well to come into the mix, which we had, like you said at the start tonight, we haven't had such an impactful set for quite a while. So it's definitely keeps people on their toes. Would I play it or keep it to this format? I think I would, but I don't think I'd be as confident as I have this weekend. Um, I think Charizard will see an increase in play, and as we saw in the stream game, it's hard matchup. It is winnable, but it is definitely hard. Um, I think even just the Charizard EX having bench barrier as well, it negates some avenues that you can take. So I think I would personally stick with it, but I think Charizard will increase. So you perhaps need to think about how you can win that matchup more efficiently,
Yeah,
for sure. I don't think any other matchups change massively. I think Guardi's going to be that's always going to be there. His conversion rate this past weekend was quite poor
yeah,
from
it
day
was
one to
awful.
day two,
Yeah,
especially. And the same, I think, with Chen Pao. So I think in that sense, they probably won't see a massive spike in play, but then they're such good, strong decks that they could do. Because people just generally in a big tournament, you want to play something that you know, and people have been playing these decks for quite some time, so they probably feel safe and comfort in playing those decks. But with the low conversion rate, it would be a deck that I'm gonna try and bend my deck to beat, if that makes sense,
yeah,
based on its performances last weekend. Um, I think, yeah, I don't think there's anything else that will massively come by. I still think Roaring Moon has potential if looking at those conversions for things like Gardevoir, which is obviously normally a bad matchup for it. That was quite a close matchup, and quite a tough matchup because it can just uptrade.
yeah,
You do have Greninja to be able to balance that back out, which is quite nice. But yeah, I think I would stick with it. I think I would perhaps need to go back to the drawing board with Charizard because it was dominant in top eight.
yeah,
If that deck can figure out its Snorlax matchup, then it was taking that tournament home. Let's be honest. At one Snorlax took them all down. So that's a matchup that obviously Charizard needs to be aware of. But I think Charizard's probably in a very good place. And even if you're expecting Charizard, there is no good grass attackers in this format. There's no real hard counters in that sense. So unless you want to go wild and find something, then you've got Entei to worry about. That's going to give you headaches, and even Sablezard and things like that. I think that's probably the only other deck I would expect a bit more of is Lost Zone decks.
yeah,
With Tord creating up that list and all those different flavored attackers and Pokemon in, I think it shows that Mirage Deck is such a strong card that you can put it into pretty much any deck and any attackers and make it work and be competitive because it just does what it does.
yeah,
It does it efficiently. So I think I would play it, but think about the Charizard matchup.
yeah. Makes a lot of sense. On to some more, I guess, general questions, because obviously, like I say, we've still got two more large scale or large tournaments this year. You've kind of already touched on how you think the meta is evolving, but just sort of for the video's sake, so over the past week we had two top eights that were 5 Zard, 3 Guardy, 3 Mew, 3 Snorlax, and then yourself with the Palkia and Tord with his Lost Box deck. Pretty varying results between Gdansk and Brisbane. I think they were, there was no Guardy in Gdansk at all, whereas there was 3 in Brisbane. Like you say, though, Zard was the big winner this weekend, even though it didn't necessarily take down a tournament. It got second at both tournaments and had the most meta share. Going into Stuttgart, what do you kind of expect to be the most popular 3 decks? Do you think it's going to be quite similar to this weekend, or do you think we're going to have a bit more of a shift again? And what do you think is going to be what would be the 3 decks that you expect to see the most popular for Stuttgart in a couple of weekends' time?
It's a really tough question because, like I said, I expect Charizard to be good, and God of War's conversion rate was terrible. But if you expected Charizard to be good, does God of War go off on the back of that? Because it's got a good Charizard matchup. So we're getting into that format now where obviously there's probably about 10 decks that you could play and give yourself a fighting chance with. But I think Miraidon is going to be top 3 still. I think it can be anything. It has no water loss again. It's another deck that's sort of more of a 50-50 across the board. It can deal with the 2 prize and 1 prize decks because of Ampy very much now the extra tool that it had. It used to obviously really struggle with 1 prize decks.
Yeah.
So I think that's just the safest play for the tournament because it has speed, it has power, and it has basically ways to trade up. I think Charizard will be in the top 3 because of how well it did. And then after that, it could be one of a plethora of decks that I'm not too sure where I'd like to put my finger on.
Yeah.
I think across the 2 tournaments, even if they're on the same weekend, would have massively different results. Because as we've seen, I think Europe tends to favour things like Mew, whereas America and LAIC and Australia, looking at their results, God of War was prevalent in both of those tournaments. So I think it's a difficult one to call, but I think those Miraidon and Charizard will be my first 2.
Yeah.
And then after that, you could probably pick out any one of 4 decks.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think, we're still, like I say, we went into Paradox Rift, and I think one of the widest metas we'd had in a while, and I don't really feel like maybe other than, I guess, Lugia, I don't really feel like any deck has actually pretty much fallen off at all from before then. And we've had the inclusion of Entei Valiant, we've had the inclusion of Blocklax, we've had the inclusion of potentially even Palkia making it into that top 10 now, a couple of other archetypes here and there. So, yeah, still feels like we're in a really wide meta. And it's going to be interesting to see how the results or how the meta shifts. I believe San Antonio is actually a week after Stuttgart, so they will have at least a week to react to the Stuttgart results. But again, that's not long to really react in a wide meta when in a narrow meta, usually that's not too bad because your options are probably fairly limited. But yeah, in a format like this where there are 5, 6, 7, maybe even upwards of 10, like you say, decks that realistically you have a fighting chance of at least making day 2 with, maybe even potentially pushing through to top 8 with as well. It's going to be pretty exciting. One more interesting question from a sort of rogue versus meta perspective. Obviously, you're kind of known to play some more off-the-wall decks, not necessarily some meta decks. But as a more of a rogue player, what sort of meta decks would you perhaps be looking at? So if we're expecting maybe a lot of Miraidon, a lot of Charizard, and let's say, I guess, God of War is the 3rd most popular, because again, no matter what, people sort of really flock to that deck. Great draw engine, super powerful. Out of some of the more meta decks, maybe not more of a rogue concept, more of a standard archetype, what do you think would be potentially one to look at going into that kind of meta?
It's a really difficult one because I feel like the ability over the last sort of 6, 7 years really to build and play road decks and do well at tournaments has been nullified quite a lot. You've had different things like you've got Ampy very much now, which restricts one prize deck. You've had in the past Saberline in sort of recent formats. Lugia, when it first came out, was just a powerhouse. It had one prize answers and two prizes.
Yeah.
And then even further back, you had things like was it Reverse City?
The
I can't think of the stage in which reduce your opponent's bench to 3, which depending on which way you put
Parallel City. Yeah.
Parallel City. That again could stifle creativity. It can control your board, say in the format that almost all decks wanted to go wide.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to look at decks that really not necessarily auto win 2 or 3, because in the past, previously, you could target 2 or 3 decks. It was more of a triangle meta, whereas this feels more like a 11-a-side football team meta than a triangle meta. So you can't cover all your bases. You just can't. So you've got to try and predict what you're gonna come up against and see the most of, and then how can we sort of counter those. Or if a deck has maybe really good matchups into 5 or 6 decks, but has a really difficult matchups into 1 or 2 others, is there any way you can build or manufacture the deck to try and even those 2 bad matchups? Because you'd rather, like I said with Palkia, like a 50-50 deck across the board, give or take. But you'd rather have that than maybe 4 80-20s as a rogue deck. This is obviously not in general, but 4 80-20s and then 3 20-80s. You want to try and even that swing out rather than being the extremes on either side. So it doesn't matter what you're up against, but I think building rogue decks is hard because of the varied format. I think I was in a good position with Palkia where I've had some obviously a lot of 2 prize matchups and a lot of matchups that have been a racing format.
Yeah.
And I think the format in general is going that way more. Lost Box and Guard of War will always be there because of the power and the speed and the sort of tricks and tools that they can have.
Yeah.
Until obviously a lot of those cards rotate. And the same with Mew. Mew's always going to be there because it's got one of the best draw engines you've ever seen in Pokemon. So to build a rogue deck in this format, I think try and predict what you're going to see, and then go from there and try and build a deck to manufacture results against those. It's not easy, and I think I was probably in a very fortunate place and position for my matchups, knowing the deck as well as I do. But I guess that'd be the other side of it. Play it as much as you can, understand the decks.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Like you say, you've been playing it in cups for a little while. I mean, we both played Palkia back like a year ago for Worlds 2022. So there's been a lot of Palkia sort of throughout, I guess, the past 18 months even in your kind of peripherals. So it makes a lot of sense. Last couple of quick questions, a bit more general. One, what was your favourite part about Gdansk? Obviously, other than the tournament, what was your favourite part about the weekend in general? Because personally, it was a brilliant region. I thought didn't do too well, but the region or the city was brilliant. The weather was cold, but kind of a bit magical. It was Christmas market weekend, that kind of stuff. What was your favourite part about Gdansk?
I think obviously we went to Warsaw last year for Poland regionals, which I was lucky enough to attend, and I've really sort of grown quite fond of Poland as a country. It's nice food, nice drink, reasonably priced. So I think just seeing another part of Poland, I really enjoyed the place. And I hope they bring one back to Poland again next year. It's a lovely country. It's been great to me both times that I've gone, and just seeing different parts of the city and the places, and there's a lot of history within the area and stuff. And it was nice to sort of have a wander around and see different things. The Christmas market side is always a bonus. It's nice. it's a nice time of year for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So experiencing that, but yeah, I guess seeing different parts of Poland and Gdansk.
Yeah, definitely. A more Pokemon related one. What do you think has been the most impactful card from Paradox Rift so far? And what card do you think was perhaps overhyped and has perhaps not been as impactful? Because I think there's plenty of cards that actually have been maybe not as impactful as they first thought, but have still been very impactful. Things like Iron Hands and Iron Valiant coming first and second. What's been the most impactful out of all of them, and what's sort of flopped, if any of them, or do you think everything's kind of fallen where you expected?
Yeah, it's just a very good and quite a difficult question. I think the most impactful one, perhaps if you're looking at more LOIC, was Countercatcher. And then part elements of it going into Gdansk, obviously the Snorlax deck plays a hard count of it, and it's the core to how the deck plays. So does Gardevoir, and that had obviously a massive turnout in LAIC. It's such a strong card. We were promised by Pokemon more comeback mechanics, and that's probably one of the strongest ones they could give on decks they like to set up. So it allows you to perhaps play lower decks with more setup supporters rather than the heavy boss we've always seen in these decks. But I think probably Countercatcher, but it's a close one because Paradox had so many strong cards. I think it's not underperformed because it's running into Nats, but I think Iron Hands, the sheer doom and gloom and the amount of talk and Twitter back and forth it got with that is going to ruin the game, and that'll be it for 80% of the meta because of it. I think that was obviously it's still running into Nats. I don't know if you can say it's underperformed,
I know what
but
you
it's
mean, though.
not it's not as extreme as perhaps we were led to believe, and people were sort of fear mongering and panicking about over on Twitter and in sort of groups. It's a very strong card. Taking extra prizes as well as taking extra turns is always your breaking game mechanics.
Yeah.
So it's always going to have, as long as you can get to that point where you're breaking the mechanic to charging up the full energy or Yoga Leap to take an extra turn, it's always going to be extremely powerful.
Yeah.
But it's still a full energy attack, and no matter what you put it in, you need to either have luck with generators if you're playing it in Miraidon, or you set up a stage 2 to attack with it in Chien-Pao, and then Lost Box you need double gate to get to it, which is 50% of your Mirage Gate resources. So it's just an insane card, but it's
Yeah.
not the end of days like we've perhaps first thought.
Makes sense. Makes sense. What's next for you? So we've still got plenty of regionals in the format. Where are people going to see you next?
It's probably going to be Liverpool, sadly. I didn't get a ticket for Stuttgart. I have been looking to see if any more have dropped in, but then I also looked at flights this afternoon, and I could actually probably go to a North American regional for a similar price of flights than I can to Germany, which is an hour and 20-minute flight over, not far at all. So I think probably Liverpool. I did manage to get a ticket this afternoon, so I was
Excellent.
quite fortunate there. So it'd probably be Liverpool. I'll do some cups and stuff along the way.
Yeah.
But for major events, it'll definitely be Liverpool my next one.
Cool. That's what, about 8 weeks away. So 8 weeks to cook up something new, ready for potentially another top 8, top 4, maybe even a final or a win in Liverpool. That'd be great to see.
That'd be nice.
Final thing, any shout outs, anything like that, any sort of where can people find you, all of that good stuff. Maybe people wanting to find your latest ideas or about road decks, this, that, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. I've also got to shout out our friend group. So obviously yourself, Connor, Joe, Tamal, all of the guys in our sort of group chats and things like that, because I was wavering a bit with the Ice Riders the night before, thinking about is it worth it? 'Cause I used to play Starmie, and I thought Starmie's so much better into Gardevoir. What we're going to see more of. But yes, I also got kept on the straight and narrow, and I've always bounced off ideas for yourself with talking about Palkia Ice Rider, because I was pretty set on Entei Valiant, and I thought the format was switched to a way that it wasn't favourable. I went back and we had a look at some Palkia lists and discussed some. So yeah, you can catch me on Twitter at Luke Kirkham. I go through phases of being quite active on Twitter and not so much. But I'm obviously trying to work on that and build up my profile and following in that way. So by all means, come and say it, and I'll always, if I do well at any tournaments with any crazy deck, because I'm always trying to cook something up. I'm always happy to share it.
Amazing. You can see just below Luke on the screen as well his Twitter @ So make sure you follow me on Twitter. And yeah, other than that, obviously congratulations once again this weekend. Hoping to it's been brilliant to sort of see people playing the deck afterwards as well. So you've definitely made your mark on the 2023-24 season for sure. And yeah, thanks so much for joining me. It's been a great chat. Hopefully, you people at home have been able to get a little bit of insight as to how more of a rogue player thinks, how to, try and start your own journey playing some rogue decks. Make sure you try out the Palkia deck. It's a lot of fun. If you're looking for codes to be able to play it on PCG Live, make sure you check out the Potown store where you can use code OmniPoke for an extra 5% off your order as well. So tear up the ladder and try and get some ranked wins on there. But yeah, other than that, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for joining me, Luke, and I will see you all in another video soon. Cheers, everyone.